Ukrainian intelligence conducted a successful operation in the village of Tetkino, Kursk region of Russia. FPV drones destroyed communications equipment, vehicles, and a building with enemy personnel, the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine says. The operation in the Kursk region was conducted by the Vidmak, Witcher in Ukrainian, Idowero, Strike and Reconnaissance Group, together with the State Border Guard Service and the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The Ukrainian intelligence found out the location of Russian communications equipment, vehicles, and personnel. The targets were eliminated with the help of FPV drones. The pilots of the kamikaze drones have demonstrated their skills and continue to effectively strike at the Muscovites, the statement said. And since August, Ukraine has been conducting an operation in the border areas of the Kursk region of Russia. During this time, a military commandant's office has been established there, about 100 Russian settlements have been taken under control, and hundreds of Russian soldiers have been captured. Some of them have already been exchanged for Ukrainians. In mid-August, Russian President Vladimir Putin instructed the Russian command to fully regain control of the entire territory of the Kursk region, but their counteroffensive failed. Currently, Russia's wider war on Ukraine didn't make the tank obsolete, but it did make the men and women who operate tanks much more careful. Small drones are everywhere all the time over the 700-mile front line in the 31-month wider war. The threat from these all-seeing drones, many of them carrying grenades or rigged with explosives, forces the tankers to hide and sneak around if they're going to have any chance of surviving. Ukrainian and friendly drones crisscross the airspace, hunting for valuable targets like heavy armor and artillery, David Kirichenko wrote for the Center for European Policy Analysis in Washington, D.C. This aerial cat-and-mouse game has fundamentally altered tank tactics. It's a new era of the cautious tank, according to CEPA. There was a time in the early decades of armored warfare where tanks could roll across the battlefield in broad daylight and their crews could expect to survive. Rough terrain, mines, artillery, handheld anti-tank weapons, and other tanks posed a threat, but not an existential one. It was this expectation that tanks could survive, especially when supported by engineers, infantry, artillery, and air power, that underpinned the tank doctrine that the biggest armies championed through the Cold War and into the 2020s. Tanks would spearhead powerful attacks on enemy lines, aiming to break through the outermost defenses in order to run amok in the enemy's vulnerable rear area. The essence of tank warfare was aggressive attack, not caution. And many advocates of armored warfare would say that it still is. Massive tank-led attacks were common as recently as the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. But in the 20 years that followed, drone technology developed faster than anti-drone defenses developed. When the Russian army launched powerful tank assaults deep into Ukraine in February 2022, it ran straight into the drone revolution in armored warfare. Russian tank columns, stretched out along the highways leading to Kiev, were under constant surveillance by Ukrainian drones. Ukrainian artillery and anti-tank missile teams lay in wait to ambush the Russian vehicles where they were most vulnerable, at the end of the Russians' fragile supply lines. Currently, it got worse for the tankers. The first few explosive first-person view drones appeared in the sky over Ukraine, as the Russians fell back later in 2022. By 2023, the tiny hovering drones, some equipped strictly for surveillance, others built to explode on contact, were everywhere. Today, Ukraine builds £2,500 FPV drones at a rate of $3 million per year. Russia at least matches that production rate, although its poorly managed drone operators may be less skilled, and most tanks were designed in eras when attacks from the sides and front were most common. To protect tanks from the likeliest attacks, engineers thinned out the tank's top and back armor and reinforced the armor on the turret face and along the hull's frontal arc. But FPV drones can strike at angles that exploit this thinner protection along a tank's top and back. The sheer number of FPV drones over a given length of the front line, sometimes dozens at a time in a single spot, compounded the problem. In 2024, you can have a $500 FPV drone take out a tank worth millions. A tanker with the last name Bowden told Kirichenko. FPV are now among the biggest killers of Russian and Ukrainian tanks. In 31 months of hard fighting, the Russians have lost around 3,300 tanks, according to the analysts at the Oryx Intelligence Collective. That's as many tanks as the Russian military had in active service before the wider war. The Kremlin has made good its losses by building new tanks and reactivating old Cold War tanks. The Ukrainians have lost nearly 900 tanks, and that's also nearly 100% of their pre-war inventory. To put into perspective the scale of the tank losses, consider that the British Army possesses slightly more than 200 tanks, and the Russian Army loses that many tanks in 2 months. Russian and Ukrainian tankers are scrambling to adapt, to survive. Tanks hide and fire their guns from under the cover of camouflaged, stationary positions. When tanks must venture out into the open for attacks, their crews count on anti-drone radio jammers and layers of add-on armor, outward exploding reactive blocks, metal grills, and shed-like metal shells to mitigate the risk from drone strikes. Right now, tanks aren't as effective as they once were, a tanker with the first name Victor told Kirichenko. But that doesn't mean they aren't still useful. Tanks will still be around in the future, but FPV drones have changed tank warfare forever, Victor added. Don't expect hundreds of tanks to mass for swift attacks across open ground like Russia did as recently as 2022 to 2024. Swarms of drones have rendered that tactic obsolete, and instead, tanks will fight in small numbers and from under cover where possible, their crews more cautious than ever.